Shalom, everyone. I'm Rabbi Rob Lennick, the Executive Director of the Jewish Federation, and it's good to spend a few minutes with you as we welcome Shabbat together this week. I want to begin with a memory that I have that has always stuck with me. I had been to Israel many times and visited the Kotel, and then one time I went to the Kotel, and it was right after the opening of the Western Wall tunnels, and I had never been in that area before. So I ventured in. And I can tell you from the moment I walked in that area, I felt a sense of something extra spiritual. And I wasn't sure why. So then I ventured further into the tunnel. And I came to a place where there was a small opening in the wall where you could look and you could see like a crawl space running underground away from the tunnel. And so I went and looked more closely at that opening in the wall, and there I saw hundreds of the little notes that people usually stick in the crevices of the kotel. It's called a petek. And on a petek, you write a little message, a prayer. You write blessings, hopes, and dreams. And whenever people go to the kotel, they place the notes in the wall, and I thought, wow, I've left quite a few of those notes over the years. And then I thought, wow, I always wondered, what do they do with all the notes in the wall when it fills up? So maybe they clean them out and then they bring them in here and they lay them in this special place. Though I didn't know. But I did stand there transfixed. And I looked up and I saw this small, unassuming sign. And written in Hebrew and English with an arrow pointing toward the crawl space were the words Kadosh Kadoshim, Holy of Holies. So it turns out it is thought, based on some archaeology, on the spatial layout of the Temple Mount, some biblical and other evidence, that in that direction, where the arrow was pointing, through the ground, underneath the surface of the land, that may be the actual place where the original Holy of Holies, the Kadosh Kodashim, the inner sanctum of the ancient Israelite temple once stood. And I'll tell you, for many, that place in the tunnel, I soon learned, was what they believed to be the holiest of holy ground. In other words, it was the closest you could get to that Kadosh Kadoshim, to that place of the ancient shrine. So it's no wonder that either the notes that were first in the kotel were placed there, or probably more truthfully, people made a point to place their notes of supplication in that place because of its closest proximity to the Holy of Holies. So I quickly jotted down a note and I carefully placed it right there in the opening in the wall. Over the years since that first encounter with that spot in the tunnel, whenever I visit Israel, I will take notes from anyone who would like, and I will make a pilgrimage right to that very spot where the sign points to the Holy of Holies, and I will lay the notes right there in the opening in the wall. You know, when you think about it, whether that spot is actually as close as one can get to the ancient shrine or not, almost doesn't matter. Because if I reflect about what I felt there, it made me aware, keenly aware, that there is something within me and within each and every one of us. There's something within us that yearns to feel closer to our sacred origins. There's something within all of us that desires very deeply a connection to a spiritual flow, like a river of ancient energy that crosses time and space. And standing next to that place, close to the Kadosh Kodashim, brings that feeling right up to the surface. The deeper lesson that I've learned over the years, thinking about that experience, is that the most ethereal Holy of Holies of them all is not ultimately in that specific sacred location in Yerushalayim, but rather I've come to believe that the holiest of Holy of Holies is actually within each one of our own human hearts. That actually our hearts are the most powerful and important inner sanctum that life has blessed us to receive. And I think it's really important right now, especially in the world of COVID-19 and the growing movement against the cultural pandemic of racism, that we think about what dwells within the Holy of Holies within our hearts. And I would say that the best way for us to survive COVID-19 is that we all have to open our hearts to others by protecting them through the rigorous wearing of masks and social distancing and thorough hand washing and use of antiseptics. And we cannot become lazy about it. We cannot back off of doing these things because we have to open our hearts to other people and make sure that their lives are our first concern. Even if it is an inconvenience, even if it feels like an infringement, even if it's uncomfortable, we need an open heart to take care of others. And also, in addition, to bring systematic racism to an end, we will have to open our hearts as well and listen and learn about the unique and tragic experiences of Black and other communities of color and the suffering and the tragedy they've experienced as objects of abject systemic racism. And opening our hearts in this situation means that we have to be willing to face up to the realities of white privilege, conscious and unconscious bias, and we have to become educated and become more than simply people who say, we are not racists. We have to actually learn the skills and understand what it means to be anti-racists so that we're willing to stand up to racism whenever it shows up in any aspect of our lives. And so we need an open heart to ensure in both COVID-19 and in the fight against racism, we need open hearts to ensure that compassion for others is our first number one emotion. Now, some believe that within the original ancient Holy of Holies, the Shekhinah would dwell. The Shekhinah is known as God's feminine, loving presence. And it is the basis of what we call Rachmanut. Rachmanut is compassion. And it's important to know that the word Rachmanut is rooted in the Hebrew word rechem, which means womb. So Rachmanut, or compassion, as we defined it in our tradition, is something of the womb, meaning it is life-giving, nurturing, unconditionally loving, embracing of all others. It's an emotion that is like the biggest emotional hug that can be given to the world around us. in every single encounter. And so the ancient belief that the Shekhinah dwelled in the ancient Holy of Holies suggests that the Shekhinah lives now also in the Holy of Holies within our own hearts. And releasing this kind of love, releasing this Rachmanut from the Shekhinah that dwells within the Holy of Holies within our hearts, is what the world needs now. It is what we all need now. And knowing that this Rachmanut dwells inside us, ready to be shared, to be released, to me is a huge source of hope and optimism, even in the midst of the most challenging times. It turns out this week's Torah portion, Shalach Lecha from Bamidbar, from the book of Numbers, is all about hope and optimism in the face of doubt and cynicism. We read the story of the 12 scouts that Moses sends to the Promised Land. In anticipation of the Israelites crossing the Jordan River, Moses wanted to know the lay of the land. The scouts go and they come back, and 10 of them report that the land is filled with giants, claiming, "We are like grasshoppers in comparison to them. We cannot go in there." So the 10 lost faith in God's promise and in the covenant that went back to the time of Abraham and Sarah, and they advised Moses not to lead the people forward. It's so sad to consider that they gave up on God. They gave up on the community. They gave up on each other. And most of all, they gave up on themselves. They were consumed with fear and negativity. And one might say their hearts were closed shut. In the times we're living now, it's very easy to become consumed with fear and negativity. But we have to keep an awareness that we have this infinite source of Rachmanut dwelling right within our own hearts. Now, the two remaining scouts, Joshua and Caleb, they called for confidence and displayed what it means to have an open heart. And they showed optimism and faith in God's promise. So the Holy of Holies in their hearts were wide open, allowing the spirit of Rachmanut to emerge, to guide them, to bring them hope, and to fuel their optimism for the future. And in the end, Joshua and Caleb were the greatest of role models, not simply of their optimism and hope, but of their Rachmanut, because they did not even call for the punishment of the 10 naysayers. In fact, a minyan, the 10 people required for a prayer service, a public service, the quorum of Jewish prayer, the number 10 people is derived from the 10 naysayers. So even the naysayers had a place of honor in the evolution of our tradition. Though while we don't follow the example of the naysayers, and we follow the example of Joshua and Caleb, we recognize we are one community where we have people with strong faith and people with strong doubt. But in that, we are all together. You know, from what we're hearing, it seems that the siege of COVID-19 will continue for some time. Staying at home, limited in-person contact, the limits on our movements and gatherings are most certainly a burden and understandably bring us down from time to time. But we do have a choice, and we have the ability to align ourselves with Joshua and Caleb and open our hearts to one another, rather than aligning with the 10 doubters, people who were dominated by fear. We can let the Shekhinah that resides in the Holy of Holies within our own hearts shine outward into the world, as exemplified by Joshua and Caleb. If we think about what it means to really be hopeful and optimistic during these difficult times, sometimes it's as simple as making a declaration of resolve. So this Shabbat, let us resolve in the spirit of Joshua and Caleb that together we will continue to support one another through this most difficult time. And together we will prevail over COVID-19 and racism. And together we will bring the love of the Shekhinah into all of our encounters and show Rachmanut in all that we do. And together we will emerge from the challenges we face, and we will embrace the promised land, as did Joshua and Caleb and the people. And that promised land, God willing, will be a place where illness from COVID-19 is eradicated, where racism will enter the annals of past history as one of the worst of human blights, and will finally be replaced with the universal embracing spirit of Rachmanut, which is a true mutual compassion realized and shared among all the people of our world. It's when the Holy of Holies within our hearts will venture out so that the whole world itself will be the Kadosh Kodashim, the Holy of Holies, where Rachmanut will suffuse everybody's lives. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it come true in our lives. Shabbat Shalom.